Let's roll. All right, what's going on, Ryan? How are you, man?
Hey, Jake, what's going on, my man?
Oh, not much. I think we're officially live. It will take a little bit for people to start joining. So I'm doing good, dude. I'm doing good. I had to go watch Frozen 2 this weekend, and I just want to tell you, it's horrible. It's really bad. Like, I'm like, I don't know how I was the parent. Like, this birthday party is for 5-year-olds, and it's like you can only have one parent and one kid, and somehow I had to go. I was the volunteer to go watch Frozen. It was not a good movie. The first one I felt like at least had a plot. This one was not great.
What type of toy and clothing fallout is going to come from Frozen 2?
Oh God,
for both yourself and the kids.
That mince money. I don't know. I just try to steer them away from it. My wife says I let my kid watch too many. I started to put on John Wick 2 on Saturday night. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It'll be fine."
You should have watched it. My wife's in the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's literally in the last scene. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
So that's what I did this weekend. What about you, man?
It was all family. I had my nephew's 3rd birthday. He wanted a blue monster truck, so that was the highlight of the day for him and I. It was a lot of carpet drive 4-wheel time. It was good.
Oh, I like that.
It was really good. We had the big wheels going. It was nice.
That's what when my son turned 3, that's when we got him a big wheels too.
It's fun. It's so much fun.
It's so much fun, man. All right, dude. Well, look, you and I catch up like once every couple months or so. I'll be back in New York in a couple weeks, so I'll have to grab dinner again. We've got Josh asked the first question: Frozen 2 or The Shining? Well, actually, Josh, last weekend I watched Dr. Sleep, the follow-up to The Shining. That was really good. So I highly recommend Dr. Sleep. Do not bring your 5-year-old to it, though. They are not ready for Dr. Sleep. So look, you and I were going back and forth. I asked you the question. I said, what are you the best in the world at? I said, like, hey, what do you want to do? And you said, Jake, what I actually want to talk about is like ego and sales. And I've done a couple posts about it, just kind of defining, I guess, some of my thoughts on it. But usually the format for this, man, is we're going to do Q&A. I've got some kind of questions preloaded for questions that we've got over the last like week or two. And then, look, everyone who's tuning in now, we've got about 50 people right now. Again, like I think a lot of the things we're going to cover is, like what goes into like a healthy sales org, what goes into building a healthy career around ego. Yeah. So any questions, anyone has around, the way that they're thinking about that, like what's too much, what's not enough, because I think that's a question a lot of people have. So, we can just kind of, jump into it, man. So I'd love to know maybe, and in this topic in particular, what is, how does this topic resonate with you? This is something where you're like, I'm really passionate about. So what is it about this topic in particular that gets you kind of so excited, so passionate?
Yeah, it's first of all, I mean, you and I could probably talk about this for, probably a whole year. And it's something that almost comes up every single day in my business, personal and professional life. And I'm pretty passionate about it, especially when it comes to the younger sellers out there, the younger go-to-market professionals that are thinking about, okay, so I've just stepped into this new opportunity. I want to make my presence felt. There's all of these incentives and targets in front of me. And then they hit that first incentive and target. And there's this moment, it's like, okay, so I want the world to know that I just hit this target and I just achieved this goal. And right. I'm ahead of the person next to me or the person in front of me. And there's no looking back. Like, I am the best. I did it. I made it. This was step one. And I think what gets missed along the way is just like taking a step back and understanding like what this journey really looks like. And I know you and I are huge fans of Gary Vee, and he always talks about the long game. And I really break it down into three areas, right? So it's the ascent, it's the journey, and it's the ego that gets connected and attached to the journey. And then when you hit that moment or that peak of success, there's an ego that gets attached to that moment. And you have an opportunity to do a few things with that moment. You can shout to the world that you just achieved it. You can celebrate with your peer group. You're probably going to be celebrated in some format. And then that feeling or that moment becomes addictive, and for many reasons why a lot of sellers stay in the profession. Yeah. And then there's, of course, the last step, which is the descent or a moment of failure. And then ego also gets attached to that piece as well, because when you're very early on, you're going to have a failure here and there. I don't think I've ever met a professional, whether admitted or not, that hasn't had a failure early on. It's how the ego gets attached to that failure that's most interesting to me. So it's do I cast it out on the fact that I wasn't trained appropriately? Right. Do I cast it out on I didn't have access to a resource? Or do I just say, hey, it's part of my journey, it's part of my learning process. I'm actually super excited to have the opportunity to sort of fail upward or fail forward, and I'm on to that next step. So I think it's just really breaking down those three things: the ascent, the pinnacle of success, and then whenever that moment of failure, how does your ego get attached on to each of those things? And I think the more consistent, I don't know if level-headed is the right descript. I think it's just consistency with motivations for the journey. And I think it's consistencies with motivations for your own purpose, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, do you feel like is a lot of this for you, at least how people handle the fall, right? Or like the missteps? Or is it like the yin and yang of the missteps coupled with the highs? Like, you know what I mean? That, like, what do you feel is what do you see more of? You know, I can give my 2 cents too, but what do you see as like a bigger issue, or what you see more of?
Yeah, I think it's how easy it is to find ego in our everyday is what I'm finding the most of. So, you know, for example, if I write an article or I put up a post and it gets a tremendous amount of activity or likes, there's an opportunity for your ego, and it's intentionally or unintentionally, to take over that moment, right? And whether you've sort of hit your purpose for the day or purpose for that moment, it's really what that moment does to you as a professional and how it carries you forward and how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, if you attach that moment onto your purpose, your greater purpose, for example, that moment's going to mean very little. If anything, it's your ability to sort of execute on an activity. You're enjoying the work so much that you want to share it. You're giving, sharing. Your intentions are amazing. And you're just on to that next intention.
Right.
Whereas there might be someone else that takes it as, oh my God, I've got 99 likes. I've got like 1,000 views. Obviously, everyone wants to hear what I have to say. I'm incredible. I'm going to set this thing on fire. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do all these things. I'm validated. I'm totally validated. And then in that moment of just like, oh my God, I just got punched in the face because either something didn't fall my way at work, or a partner didn't get back to me, or I had a bad day at home. I think it's very hard to come back from that as fast as someone who just says, I love this work. I'm validated by myself and the work that I'm doing because I'm just so passionate about my purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, dude. I think that makes a ton of sense, man. And I think that's it. You know, I've sat down with people before and they started a conversation like that. And I'm just like, sure. You know what I mean? And I don't even talk about like, you know, what we do on a month, or, you know, I don't really talk too much about it, but that's it, dude. I think that's the key, but I think it's really tough as an outsider to know the difference. Like I you know, when I started posting a lot and putting a lot of my thoughts out there, I think a lot of people thought it was ego. I think a lot of people saw it as that, like, oh man, who's Jake Dunlap? He's putting this stuff out there. So I think that's something that I saw, you know, people consistently like have issue with. Uh-oh, did we lose Ryan? Might have lost Ryan for a second. So I'll just rap for a little bit. Man, I got to tell you, this LinkedIn Live interface, it's fun. Kara, do you know what's going on with Ryan? He has to come back in. Okay, cool. So for me, I think, you know, I started posting, and for me, it was about, I felt like I had value. I felt like I had something to give. And it was like, I'll just put it out there that, you know, Ryan mentioned Gary Vee, for example. Like, look, I was, you know, maybe, I guess, when did I start really doing this? Probably 37 at the time. Yeah, 37. And I think like a lot of people, like I was going through my own kind of thing of like, shit, you know, I haven't made $1 billion. I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, I've got my own company and this and that, but I didn't really appreciate or understand that how long the game was. And I feel like that's what causes a lot of like the ego stuff, is that you don't really quite know how long the game is. And so when that happens, look, you've got to start to have an appreciation, and that makes you feel, I think, more comfortable putting stuff out there. So Laura, I appreciate you joining. Looks like Matt said that he just lost connection real quick, so we'll have Ryan back. So I'm going to dive into some of these questions. I'm going to go into Laura. So what's up, Laura? Laura Hopkinson. What is the most difficult personality type for you to work with? Okay, this one is very simple for me. And if there's anyone on here who has ever worked with me, you are going to know this, and this is going to resonate. There's a lot of people who talk about coachability and growth mindset. And coachability and growth mindset, again, you can have the thing that I think a lot of people understand, you can have a big ego and still be super coachable. Like for me, I actually think I feel good about myself, and I think I'm good at what I do, but I don't care about being right. And and it doesn't mean I'm not going to push back on you. I'm not going to like have an opinion about something. I'm going to push back. And as a part of that, but I'm also very open to it. And so for me, the worst personality for me, and again, if you've worked for me, you know this, is if you aren't actually coachable or you don't actually want to grow. Because my default is growth 24/7. Like I'm trying to make myself better, working with other people. And that doesn't mean I'm not trying to fix people. I'm just trying to work with them where they are. And the same way I want them to kind of work with me and help me to get to where I want to be, as an individual or as a professional. So from a high level, I think you can have an ego, but for me, to answer your question, if there is an ego that gets in the way of your ability to be coached or your ability to get better, that is when I have a problem with you. But there's other people who are really good for that. There's a lot of leaders I know that are really good at, hey, Johnny's already here. I just leave him alone. I let him do his own thing. And then I just like move on from it. So, I know myself as a leader, and I know when I've been horrible for people, and I look back and there's a few people I can think, I'm just thinking my days at Glassdoor. There's some very senior reps, some very tenured people. And I remember going on a sales meeting with one of these reps. I was probably 30 at the time. Maybe, probably 30. And this person was probably 50, 55. And I'm the VP of sales, right? And we go to a meeting. We met with Disney. So we were in LA in person meeting with Disney. And just the meeting was not good. Like it was just not good for whatever reason. Maybe I didn't prep well enough. I don't know what happened. And so we had to go into some coaching moments. And this person was just so taken aback. Oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm like, well, sorry. Like that's not how we're going to run a meeting here. So, for me, that's it. But know it for yourself. Know what type of leader you are. You are not me. You can probably, you probably have a healthier threshold for people not being coachable than I do, because my threshold is super, super low. All right. I think we got Ryan Mang back.
Hey, Jake. Sorry about that.
It's all right. What happened? Your computer died?
I'm still trying to figure that out.
The Catalina update? The Catalina update crippled our Zoom meeting in our conference room the other day.
No, it just went black on me out of nowhere.
I was just talking about like the worst type of people to hire, difficult personality types to work with. Yeah. For me, and I said it's a very personal decision. I just gave a story about a woman that I had hired and led, and it was a bad hire by me. Not that she was bad. I just didn't a fit for me. And I really struggle with people that aren't coachable. Like not just struggle, like I'm a bad manager, like bad. Because like I just don't understand not having a growth mindset. It's like a foreign concept to me. And so, that was my kind of like piece. But I also said like, look, there's other leaders who are actually okay with people like that and they're good with it. And that doesn't, and that's, I wish I was a little bit better at it, that I could like tone it down a little bit. But that's why, look, when you start your own company, I can create whatever values I want.
That's right.
So one of our values is work smart. It's like, and we value, and it's always growth. So now I just hire people and I have less stress. But Laura had a follow-up question that I think is really an interesting one.
Yeah.
She said, as a sales leader, what can we do when we first sense that ego is contributing to conflict on the team? Would love to hear you deal with it in the real world when Sally keeps flexing at Sharon. By the way, Laura, excellent analogy. I appreciate you calling out Sally and Sharon and flexing, all of which are amazing. So how do you deal with this, man? Like, let's say if you're a frontline leader, or even shit, man, as a VP, and you've got maybe directors who are going at it. Like, how do you typically handle ego in the team? How do you think about dissecting it? There's just so many different ways it can manifest.
Yeah. I've looked at that moment as a deflection of something that person is likely uncomfortable with. So what does that mean? I usually just retract and say, okay, so talk me through your 5 mentors, or the 5 people you seek advice from, or the 5 things that you're constantly looking to learn on a weekly, daily, monthly, annual basis. And the answers that come back are just usually pretty amazing. They are always looking inward for answers. And that's a very dangerous thing. I mean, I see myself as a 77-year-old still trying to find, 99% of the answers that I'm looking for, right?
Right.
I plan to have the same energy when I'm 77 years old. I plan to be as curious as I am today. I don't think that process ever stops. But usually, when those battles incur in the office, it's usually about just saying, okay, like, if those 5 people are giving you this advice in this moment, is that helping you get to conflict resolution? And then that person will usually ask themselves, who actually would I go to feedback for? Because I'm usually just listening to myself. Or if I'm going to ask somebody, I'm already answering a question before it's asked. So it's just an interesting phenomena that I don't think you can get in front of, especially if you've done your due diligence through the hiring process and the promotion process. But I think asking that simple question, and then also just reflecting on, have I walked into a meeting wanting to learn something from another human being, or have I not? Is my intention to learn? Is my intention to talk? Is my intention to dictate? I think that's a good way to just, incorporate some sort of cadence before you step into a meeting or step into a conflict. That's
such a good call out. That I think with the ego too, like, a lot of times you can trigger people's ego by ambushing them. I didn't know we were going to have this conversation. Whoa, now I got to flex. And I think what you're doing is saying, like, hey, like, how do you like to take feedback? Or what is that? We call it aligning. We work with companies on this too, where before you can coach someone or work with them or even help them, you need to align that they want to be coached, or that they're in a good place. Maybe something happened with their family. Maybe they're feeling bad about themselves. Maybe, their husband left them, or wife left them, or, they're an alcoholic. Like, there's a million things that are going on. And I think as I get older in my career, I think I'm developing a much greater understanding of just, how much stuff we all have going on. And I think sometimes we can trigger people's ego because they actually feel insecure, or they have other things going on. And so I think, step one is, if you have this person, what were the names? Sally's flexion on Sharon. I think it's like you're creating a space. Sally, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what's happening. Tell me more. And you lead from a place of questions and a place of, really truly helping to, like, understand. I just think that can make such an impact. And I've learned that a lot over my career too. I think I'm still okay at it. I think I'm still like mediocre.
I think, Jake, the other thing too is I think we've given ourselves the authority to make ourselves feel great at any time. So even if I'm walking into a scenario like that and instinctively I know I'm wrong, I can leave that moment, puff my chest, walk outside, throw up a post on social media, get 2 likes. I'm back. I'm validated again. I'm good. And I think it's just this crazy cycle, right? And I think, yes, you gain wisdom with age, of course. And it is something that's learned over time. But it draws back to what I originally said, which is, okay, like, what is my actual purpose? If you get into sales, I hope that there's a purpose or an intention to make a business better, right? Or to solve a challenge that another human being has, because you're not just solving it for work, you're solving it for a lot of the things that you just mentioned too. If I'm saving this human being hours upon hours per year, that human being is going to now have more time to spend doing the things or fixing the things at home that maybe their time now doesn't allow, right? If you can get yourself to that purpose or that intention, you really feel it and internalize it, sales becomes like a lot more comfortable, in my opinion, or just go to market in general becomes a lot more comfortable. Empathy becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you're talking about a lot of the things that as an early seller or when you're not having success can be tough, but I think what we're talking about here is that a lot of this is rhythm and about being the journey that, for me, I always just trusted that if I could create a system where, I got in at X period, I did X call block here, I did another call block here, I did that. So I was never really early. I realized that the highs and lows are what kill people.
Yeah.
Like you do a bunch of prospecting, then you run a bunch of meetings and you're like, oh crap. And then you do this, where I was like, man, that kind of sucks. I'm just going to not do that. I'm just going to get in early, do my calls. I'm going to do another one here and here. And guess what? I control my calendar, so I'm not going to book over it. And for me, a lot of the ways that I controlled the highs and lows was to create structure and process around it. And that really allowed me to not, to your point, be there with that emotion of highs and lows, just okay, trust the process, keep doing this. I'm a good person. It will work out. And it generally does, man.
Yeah.
It generally does.
I mean, it's it's an old saying, but I remember my first manager ever, who I owe a great deal to, had just made the comment to me. I think it was on day 2. He's like, Ryan, if you plan on spending your entire career in some form of go-to-market, assuming some level of risk, walking into the unknown, you're probably going to fire and rehire yourself, 100,000 times over. And I've never forgot that comment, because we have no choice but to face emotion right in the face and do the best we can to stay calm, stay consistent, stay process oriented to an extent, as long as it doesn't infringe on creativity, of course. But
yeah,
it's hard. It's hard early days. It's hard not seeing those successes. But it's hard to find also a seller or a go-to-market professional that, say, has been in the game for 8 to 10 years, that hasn't been through that cycle and came out the other side because they were self-aware enough to know that it was just that. It's a cycle. So, I think we're all going through it and we're all experiencing the same thing. And as long as you can attach your ego onto purpose rather than to a moment or a piece of recognition, I think that's important.
I love that, man. What do you think? So Mr. Mitchell here, he is an awesome creator too. His question, he says, for me, the challenge is positive feedback. I don't want it to get in my head, but at the same time, feedback is important to be on the right track. This to me is an interesting one. I think the word feedback by nature has a negative connotation, even though it doesn't. Feedback is technically like Switzerland, but we've attached the word feedback to negative. And this is something, and I'll just give my own perspective, I have struggled with as well too. I have, and I think it's impaired me as a leader to give more positive feedback too. And it's something, again, that I'm very, very conscious of, that it's okay to say man, guess what? I was good at that. That went really well. So I feel like if you're asking this question, there's a high likelihood that you don't have a problem. Meaning if you're self-aware enough to feel some amount of, this is like a guilt, it's like a imposter, right? Where you're but I'm not good enough and I'm not this. And that's classic imposter syndrome. Yeah. But I can tell you it's, and then there's the 2 for 1, 2 good, 2 positive for 1 negative. But I just think it's about trying to your point, remove the emotion from it, that it was good. Well, what was good? What can I learn from? But I think you've got to be gracious about accepting positive feedback too. And positive feedback's a really, really good thing. And if you're getting positive feedback, that's fantastic. You don't need to fix everyone. You don't need to give everyone negative feedback. People are going to come around to it or they're not. And there's only so much I can do. I'm not God. I can't make people do everything I want them to. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of that though is positive feedback. I feel like a lot of leaders struggle with, and this from sales leadership, dude. Sales leaders suck at positive feedback. Let's just call it what it is. And I think it's how I was, I was raised in that culture. And so I think it's something that now as a CEO, I'm just super conscious of dude, you've got to say good things. You can't just be trying to give people room for improvement. A lot of people can't fight, especially people outside of sales, because they're not used to it. So anyway, that's my diatribe about positive feedback. I don't know what you've got to add to it or how you think about that, but it's been a struggle for me, I can tell you.
Yeah. I probably, I don't know. I probably fall on the other side. So I really enjoy giving, I look for excuses to give positive feedback. I like that. It makes me feel good, maybe to a fault.
Right.
And
Right.
I always am trying to find the positives of that teaching moment. And you do have to you have to be super, super careful because, yeah, sure. Your goal is to empower, encourage, motivate, all of these things that all great leaders do. But at the same time, it's all right. I'm giving you positive feedback. It's time to take action on this feedback. It's time to be a bit more educated on this feedback. And if the ultimate goal from this feedback is truly and genuine, I get better with this feedback rather than validation and status, then it's working. But if it's how do I achieve this next goal? How do I validate myself as a professional? How do I get that title? How do I get that promotion? I mean, this is sort of turning into another topic, Jake. I don't know if you felt this, but I almost wish there were no such thing as titles, but there were still hierarchies that existed. Because I think as young professionals, you get so caught up with, and it's not SDR to account executive. It's more of like, okay, I'm an account executive. I just crushed quota for 2 years. I should now be a senior, and now I should be a team lead. And now I'm going to be a sales manager. And now I'm doing all of these great things. And my career is moving. And LinkedIn sees it. The outside world sees it. And sometimes that works, but most of the time it doesn't because I think the value add gets lost along the way. It's like, is the same amount of value that you're adding to that organization being felt through your title? Is it being felt through your actions? I almost call it failing upward, right? It's like I'm getting promoted, but it's almost not a good thing for me. I think you call it out a lot. You're saying like, hey, take a step back. You're making $400,000 a year. That's now a lifestyle that you've chosen, you love. It's addictive, right? And now I'm going to take a step back, maybe take another role where I'm going to learn, 17 times in a very short period of time. And I'm not going to make as much, but I'm going to be able to give so much more back when I'm done or I'm out the other side of this process. So it's something that I just constantly think about and toy with because I get asked all the time about titles and promotions and what do I put on my LinkedIn page? And I just think it's not the right question to be asking, if that makes any sense.
Dude, put whatever you want. Who gives a shit? It's a substance that matters in the end. You can call yourself like SVP, CRO. I don't give a shit. I'm going to know exactly who you are. I'm trying to not drop so many F-bombs, but I'm going to know exactly who you are after about 3 minutes of talking to you. Yep. So I don't really give a shit what your title is. It's like, I'm just going to know pretty quick, like, oh, you're actually like here, like this is like where your title or not, it's like you're a director at a startup or a VP of a team of like 10. It's like, dude, if you're a VP of 10 people, like cool, that's great. But you're not now a VP that can manage 800. Like, but I hear what you're saying. That's why they're going to remove likes from Instagram. It's just going to be the merit of the content.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to change the dynamic. You're going to have more people creating. You're going to have more people actually, I think, getting out of their own way and help to remove some of that because then they won't know. I don't know how many likes I got. I don't know if it was good or not. So I'm just going to create, which I think is exciting. And that actually leads into, we just got a question from Danielle Neal. Again, everyone, if you like what Ryan's saying, Ryan told me right before we jumped on, he likes the heart emoji. So if you just hit the heart,
hit the heart.
I like the heart too. It makes me feel good. And, drop your questions in here. This is a tough one. I'm sure maybe some of you are dealing with ego at work, or maybe you're dealing with a lack of ego. Maybe you're feeling, I don't know, like, imposter syndrome a little bit. And that's what Danielle's question's about. But I think this is a really important topic to talk about. That if you can figure this part out about yourself, the tactical stuff becomes a lot easier, actually. Because then you start to, I learned at a very early age how to like look at the skeletons in my closet and not judge myself because of them. And so that allowed me to iterate super, super quick in my sales process. I could listen to myself. Other people I hate listening to myself. I hated it too, but I knew that if I listened to myself more, I would get better faster. And I think the faster you can get over your ego, the faster you can, be okay with analyzing yourself as an observer versus being kind of in it. And this is before meditation and shit. When nobody's meditating in 2003, dude, or 2005. You know what I mean? No one is like, I've centered myself and I can now, I meditate every day, but This is just being honest with yourself about where you're at and not having to be there with it emotionally. And I think Danielle's question is a good one. It's, where's the best place to start when creating your kind of your posts on LinkedIn? And I think her real question is actually next here, which is, as a person that's new to sales, I feel like I don't have much to offer. I'd like to start being more original than only sharing my company's social media. So Ryan, I'll turn it over to you. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think any personal story, in my humble opinion, is a great story, right? So it's your unique traits, your unique quality. I don't want to say it's fail-proof, but I have very seldomly seen a personal story or a personal moment of reflection or something that comes off just real. We have become so good at sniffing out social nonsense, right? Things that are just not real, that are just on rinse and repeat, that have not come from the heart, that haven't been internalized, that you're not really feeling, right? So I think anything that's personal to you that you want to share with the community at large is a wonderful thing. And I think you're going to see a lot of people really leaning into that. And if you don't have something right off the bat, find out what happens tomorrow. Someone's going to be really interested in it because it happened to you and only you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And, look, there are definitely ways to pander. If you want to pander, let me tell you. So if you just want to get likes and engagement, it's actually a very simple formula. You go find a video that performed really well on Instagram that's inspirational. It's probably a soldier that met their daughter for the first time. It's Linda is walked for the first time after the doctor said that she couldn't. LinkedIn is still very gullible. LinkedIn is still very gullible in terms of the stuff that it falls for. It's very Instagram, like 2015, where people would post and they're like, oh, that person. And don't get me wrong, there's people who are actually sharing this stuff to be inspirational. Love you. But most of the people who are sharing this are just doing it to get a bunch of likes and a bunch of engagements. But again, it doesn't really build long-term audience, and so I think your advice about that, and the thing that I think, if I was early in sales and LinkedIn was coming on the way it is now, I would view myself as more of a journalist, meaning Katie Couric isn't the smartest whatever in the world, or, I don't know who's the best, Leslie Holt or somebody. I don't know who's the best journalist now. But what does she do? She can coax out of people the question. So for me, Danielle, you're new in sales. You're talking to fellow salespeople, sales leaders, customers every single day. And my biggest advice to people who are early is just be a chronicler, just document it. Hey, look, listen to an amazing LinkedIn Live with Ryan Mang and Jake Dunlap. Anyone in sales, here's the top 2 things that you need to think about. Boom, boom, right? Just had a great call with Susie Smith and blah, blah, blah. Here's two top takeaways I had. Or if you want to anonymize it, you can do that. So just share what you learn. I think that's it. You don't have to necessarily always share what you know. You can share what you learn. And I think that makes content production, I think, a lot easier, especially when you're early in your career. So I've got a question for you. You can tell me, what's the positive side of ego? How do you think about the good side of ego? Where is ego good? And are there ways that you see it manifest that way in a sales org or not manifest that way?
Yeah, look, I think confidence is an interesting thing in sales. There's vanity confidence, right? There's the aesthetics of confidence where you have the big voice, you're controlling the room, you're sort of playing the part, you're a show woman or man, you're everybody's leaning into you, you're feeling good up there, the energy's great. There's a sense of ego that gets hooked on to that in that moment, and it feels really, really good, right?
It does. It's the best. It's
the best. I mean, you presented to me, what was that, 6 years ago? And I mean, the whole room was just caving in. They loved it.
But that's it. But that's me. I get energy out of it. Matt and my team, so we have to do facilitations, and I'll jump in. I'm like, dude, I could do this for 80 days straight. Yes. And Matt's like, if I had to do this for more than 2, I would pass out. You get energy from it. And again, whether it's ego or whatnot, it's it's more of when you're doing something you're good at, you're you like to do it. So anyway, go back. You're talking about me.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I think people get energized and motivated by that. I think it's wonderful. Look, I mean, not every Monday is going to, be in a 3-point stance. You need those human beings in your office. They're good. I think when it becomes a distraction is when it ties into everything else that person or that culture does, right? Because there's a quiet confidence too. There's something to be said about the person who's just sitting in the background, taking really, really good notes, running awesome process and going about their business and letting the results speak for themselves. And they don't need that pep talk, or they don't need that motivation. There's all different types of ego, and that ego actually might not be the best thing for that culture. I've seen this go negative too, Jake. I've seen it where you have that quiet, controlled human being, and everybody in the office is questioning, okay, this person's outperforming, that person's not willing to share a damn thing with anyone in the office. I just don't understand what's up with this person, right? I've seen it go the other way. So I think both versions are good. I think both versions need to be understood in a one-on-one or a feedback type setting. I don't think managers call them out enough, especially in sales, because culture, morale, all of these things are so darn important. So I don't know if there's the true definition of ego, to answer your question directly. I don't know if there's a good version of ego. I think there are moments where the ego will make someone come across to a greater audience as someone who is successful in doing all of the right things. And I don't see that as a bad thing. But as long as it doesn't carry you, and that's not the reason why you're motivated, I think that's fine.
Yeah, so I think what you're getting at, and just correct me if I'm wrong here, is like the difference between like confidence and ego, right? Which sometimes I think we sometimes interchange those two. You know, I think sometimes we look at confidence and ego as the same thing. You know, we're like, oh, this person's confident. They're also, you know, like I think we mislabel confidence as ego at times, and we shrug it off that Susan's confident. Susan's got an ego problem. And I don't think that that's the case.
No, I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
So that's my 2 cents. So Danny Reed has got a question. What's up, Danny? Danny, by the way, Danny was named AE of the Year last week. So Danny, congratulations to you.
Congrats, Danny. Nice.
I think he won like 10. How much? I think he won like 10 grand too.
Jake, have you ever won AE of the Year?
Have I ever won AE of the Year? It depends on your definition. On my definition, yes. Have I managed the top team at a company before? Yeah. Multiple times, yes. So I've won Sales Leader of the Year in percent to quota. That is I'd call that out. That's ego. I've like, well, I've got to say something positive here. I've got to talk about it. But anyway, Danny has a good question. So Danny says, can you both share a story about how your ego ruined a deal or ruined a relationship? So can you share an example, Mr. Mang, of when your ego ruined a deal or a relationship?
I can name you more than one, but I'll try to stamp one. So let's see. So I think my first real year as an account executive, I was probably 23. I had the luxury of selling into pretty much anyone and everyone in New York City. I was the human being that was going up and down elevators, knocking on doors, doing everything in between. But I was getting some big conversations with, call it that true middle market. So those enterprise level accounts. And for whatever reason at the time, and it's not the case anymore, but big retail in New York was sort of the companies that you wanted to go after in my particular sector. And there was one logo in particular that I just had to have, because I thought if I could put this in lights and I can make this shine across my org, everybody was going to have the respect for me, because they were saying, hey, anybody that can close XYZ Corporation is not only okay with us, but they've sort of validated it all for the company, right? This was the validation account. So I spent an inordinate amount of time just networking, entertaining, doing everything I could to bring this one home. And the worst part about it was we got the deal signed. We get off into implementation. I have multiple partners involved. And little do I know that not only was I at the wrong level and I needed to get the deal signed by the wrong level in order to get the deal signed at all, which was never validated by the C-suite.
Right.
My partners were sort of embarrassed. I was certainly embarrassed. The company and the lights that were on me for that moment in time was very short, to say the least. And I learned I learned a pretty big lesson that day. I mean, I would love to say the name of the company because I still think about them every single day.
Have you closed them since? Have you ever closed them?
So I closed them in another life.
Okay, that's fine. That's all that matters. You got them. You got it.
But man, that was the highest high and the lowest of low. And that just goes to show you, if your partner puts you in front of a situation that's good, just take care to make sure you take care of them and see it through. So,
well, look, hey, you close them eventually. That's how I look at it. A no is never no. I actively seek no, but it's never a no for forever. Like, I'm gonna get you. Like, yeah, it might take me a year.
The unicorn company logo.
It might take.
I don't know if that still exists. Do you think
totally exists. Man.
I mean, full outside the Fortune 2, like big enterprise, though. I'm just like true middle market brands. You think there's that one that sits in the corner of these offices? I don't know if it does.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. The companies now that pay for like logo acquisition is just stupid. So that's a whole other thing. All right, so oh God, I've got a lot of these. Mine were always people issues internally. So I'll tell you about Glassdoor. Glassdoor's a good one. So for me, okay, so I came from Career Builder. I was at Career Builder for 4 years, held a few different leadership, was the youngest national account executive at a 75, like closing big deals. I'm like 29. I think I'm like the man. So get the job, VP of sales at Glassdoor. Career Builder's culture at the time was very, very much sales runs the show. I was used to like, if sales said this needs to happen, this thing would happen. I didn't really understand how startups were different, and that sales is an important part, but not when you grow up in this sales culture. I mean, you came from, back from ADP, right? Yeah. Like that is a sales, culture, right? I took that same approach to Glassdoor. Did not work as well. I mean, it worked well in terms of like, look, we crushed revenue, we hit our goals, they exited last year, like life's good. But I look back at the relationships that I had with like other senior executives. I never really, mine was more of again, like you talked about, like listening to understand and those types of things. So for me, that was mine. It's like, as you progress, your job becomes, and so Danny, this would be a lesson for you, as you go from AE of the year to sales manager